I want you to repeat after me. Did. Did. I did it. Did. S did it. Did. H did it. Did. Letter T, da. Da. Da da. Da. O, da da da. Da da da. Those are the dashes of the alphabet. Now let's take note.
At the heart of any society is the desire to communicate. In today's world, with its rapidly evolving technology, the lines of communication are faster and more widespread than ever before. The ability to communicate quickly across long distances, however, started with the manipulation of a simple electrical pulse. In terms of human communication, Morse code changed everything. And while technology has long since passed it by, many amateur radio operators refuse to let this primitive yet infallible means of communication die.
Morse code is, it never was my favorite mode of communication. When I first started out in amateur radio, I hated it. You had to pass 5 words a minute to be able to get on the high frequency stuff to talk around the world. And so I passed the 5 words, and then I just really didn't want to upgrade because I didn't want to mess with the 13 word a minute test. I took some time and ended up getting involved in mobile Morse code. I had a keyer that I would attach to my leg, and when I'd be going to different cities, I was working construction on my days off from the fire station, and as I'd go to these job sites, I'd send Morse code and receive it. And due to the necessity of not being able to write down what people sent me, I had to start really paying attention to the code and what they were sending and the characters. And lo and behold, I got quick enough to pass the 13 word and upgrade. And then after that, I got to where it got to be fun.
When I was in the Navy, they had this service called Mars, which was the military ham portions of the band. And they all had ham shacks, and we'd go over and listen to the Morse code. And while we was at sea, we'd watch the flashing lights and that kind of stuff. And I was always interested, but I just never did go get my license until I got more interested after I retired and moved back here.
When I was first licensed, I couldn't wait to upgrade my license so that I could start talking instead of having to send Morse code. And all through high school, again, I started when I was in 7th grade, I never did upgrade my license at that point. So I was relegated to Morse code. I never got very good at it, didn't really want to do it at that point. I went to the Army for the next 25 years, and then when I got back into radio in 2004, I upgraded fairly quickly, but I gravitated back to Morse code, and I do it by choice. I find it very enjoyable. It's a mental stimulation as much as anything, and the camaraderie among people that use Morse code is enjoyable.
Although Morse code is considered antiquated in terms of today's communication technologies, it still commands a large user base. Respected for its reliability and simplicity, it continues to be used around the world.
You just throw out your call and they come back to you, and once you establish contact, you in your own radio system, you can tell how strong their signal is. You give them a rating and they'll give you one, and then you exchange QSL cards. And I have drawers and drawers full of cards in there from people in Europe and China and Russia and Cuba. You can go halfway one way and halfway the other way, and that makes you go all the way around the world. So you might not talk to who you want to at the exact time you want to, but you will be able to talk to somebody. And that person you're really wanting to talk to, maybe 2 or 3 days later, the conditions will be such that you can contact them.
There was a fellow in Russia. He and I would send Morse code back and forth together, and everything was home built, the receivers, everything we did. And he and I would chat back and forth, and we talked for probably 2 years. He had a son that was basically my size, and I mailed him a couple of pairs of old Levi's, and you'd have thought that I'd hung the moon for that young man. And I still get birthday cards from the young man, and that's been 15 years ago when I did that.
Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, and several times different places in Africa and all over Asiatic and European Russia, Antarctica, Japan, Australia, pretty much anywhere in the world.
King Hussein, he got quite involved with it and had a lot of royalty. Different countries started getting involved. And I never spoke with King Hussein, but I heard him on the radio several times. But there was such a large pileup of people trying to communicate that I didn't even mess with it, I just listened.
Another reason Morse code continues to flourish is the relative affordability of the infrastructure required to communicate. The costs are all up front. Radio waves are still free.
The ham radio community is by nature a helping community, and people will help you get involved in it if you want to. If you go out and buy the new high-dollar radios with all the bells and whistles, you can spend a lot of money. But you can get on the air and have a radio that functions and does what you want it to do for $150. And then if you get a couple pieces of wire and cut them to the right length, you've got an antenna. So you're on the air for $200.
Somebody that's technically proficient can build a radio out of a very small number of parts that can communicate on Morse code much easier than they could build one that you could talk using voice.
Operators use a key to send Morse code through the radio signal. The code itself uses a series of dots and dashes that represent the English alphabet and the numbers 0 through 9. Although a computer can send the message, Morse code is designed to be heard and understood by humans without the need for a decoding device. Using a key takes practice, and only practice can lead to the ability to send more words per minute.
We try to use a little Morse code along just to keep current, you know. It's like anything else, you lose your edge if you don't keep doing it.
A ham operator that uses Morse code traditionally has been able to be identified by his fist, the way that he sends the Morse code. That's less prevalent today when most people use electronic keyers and the computer sends pretty much perfect code. But when you send code manually with a straight key or what's called a bug, the rhythm of the individual sending it is identifiable to somebody that's highly experienced.
Although Morse code can and should be thought of as the original form of texting, cell phones have all but made the rhythmic telegraphic art obsolete. Newer technologies, while flashier, still don't seem as stable, particularly during emergency or disaster situations. It's just another reason Morse code continues to thrive more than 150 years after its launch.
Cell phones is great. People use them to save their lives and save their property and so forth. The only thing bad about them is they operate with cell towers, and when a tornado comes, it either takes the cell tower out or everybody gets on their cell phone and wants to talk at the same time, and the system just becomes overloaded.
Cell phones and modern communications makes most people not even interested in how the electronics of those devices operate. They are seamless to the operator, and that's the way that engineers that develop them want them to be. They don't want the owner to think about, hey, I'm sending a 900 megahertz radio transmission using CDMA modulation while I'm talking to my buddy next door.
Recently they have modified the law where the FCC no longer requires Morse code as a stepping stone. It's still available on the radios and we still use it. The diehards, we will say, still use it, but we still use it. You can get further and your signal can just punch through a lot of atmospheric conditions that voice just can't get through.
Morse code as a technique of communicating will probably always be available as an option. It requires very little power to affect worldwide communications compared to voice and very simple equipment. So it's a very reliable form of communication.